I think self-custody is empowering, and it also makes you appreciate why banks exist. Managing private keys is a specialization and complicated, so I get why people don't necessarily like excel at it. I think it is empowering for some people, but it's kind of shocking that we have a system where like you put your money in a bank and it stays there. They don't lose it. And even if there's a bank run, apparently they don't lose it still. Like that's like some weird magic that maybe it will like fall apart. But I don't want to live in a world where like we all have to self-custody for value. Like banks do exist for a reason.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. More than excited for this interview. I'm here with Dan Anderson, who is the creator of Bitcorn Crops, one of the historical NFT collections that is kind of swept under the rug, but lasted for almost 4 years at the time. Now he's gone on to co-found Rare Ordinals and also the Dan Files, a very early inscriber, as we like to say. And got to talk with Dan recently on a Twitter Spaces, which was for the first time. And I was like, yeah, I need to talk more about everything that Dan has done because he's been in the space for quite a long time. And even an early crypto podcaster from 2016, I believe. So Dan, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Jake, I've been inscribing.
You know what's funny is when the whole inscription thing happened, I think it was you, I believe Theo, and the whole Pepe community were the ones that started up Rare Ordinals, and I was like, oh man, here we fucking go again with this. Never ends. Always moving on to the next evolution of Bitcoin, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people involved with Counterparty sort of like are on the early adopter part of like a curve, and so if something new comes across, like it's not surprising that we would be messing around with it. I think always early.
For those who aren't familiar with you per se, but are familiar with Bitcorn Crops, because there is a lot of great artwork that's on there. Coinese is personally my favorite one I've not been able to find. Tell us a little bit about yourself. As I mentioned, you started a show in 2016, but how far back does your crypto experience go?
It goes pretty far back. I would preface this by saying like, I would put little stock in somebody being an OG. It just means you've been like with an internet connection for a while, and like information like distributes like differently to different people. Like like some people are living in a future that more in the future than we are ourselves today. It's like the future's not evenly distributed. So I wouldn't put too much stock in having a computer connection earlier than other people. But my first interaction with Bitcoin was around 2011. I think at that time, it was when Chuck Schumer went on the news and was basically saying, like, we need to shut down the Silk Road because they're buying drugs online. And so I definitely went and tried to buy drugs online. So I was on the Silk Road shopping, basically. But it was so early at the time where effectively the price of Bitcoin, it's a market price of Bitcoin, right? And so because Chuck Schumer went on the news and announced that you could like buy drugs with Bitcoin, the price went up in US dollars. But the Silk Road marketplace didn't have a mechanism to like adjust the BTC to like keep a steady USD price. So everything was very expensive on the marketplace at that time. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to buy any of this because this is all like really expensive. But in retrospect, it's because the price spiked and the technology wasn't there to like market price adjust, which in retrospect is really interesting to me. At the time, I thought it was like a wooden nickel. I was like, all right, cool. Like I'll buy this token, use this token, no big deal. I think and also I was predisposed, I think, to Bitcoin because I spent, so like since like 2004, I've been like buying and selling domain names. I tried to like make a website to sell hats when I was in middle school. I was like, it was called like shopwithdan.com. It was like a very lame website. But after that failed, I was left with some domains I registered, and I was able to like flip one of the domains I registered for like $30. I registered for like $8, flipped it for like $30. but that got me like really excited about it. I just like kept on buying and selling digital goods and assets or property prior to Bitcoin. And then I think the next big swing and was I bought a Butterfly Labs miner in 2013. And I actually got it. Like a lot of people did not get it, and a lot of people got hosed on buying Butterfly Labs miners. The mistakes that they made is they like bought it with Bitcoin. I bought it with dollars, but like I definitely still got hosed. Like for example, the price of Bitcoin at the time was $60, and the Butterfly Labs miner was $600 that I bought. So I could have market bought 10 Bitcoin, but instead I bought this miner and I mined 1 Bitcoin with it. But luckily the price of Bitcoin went up to $600. So like I kind of like broke even. But the other crazy thing about that time was like I got the miner and I had 3 days before the difficulty adjustment made that miner like useless. Oh. So like I like plugged it in. It's like super loud. I had like house guests over. I'm like, ignore that noise, please. I need to have this thing on. But like as those miners like hit the market and like actually got shipped, the difficulty rate was just like, and so there was just a brief window where I could break even. And that taught me a ton about Bitcoin mining, where it's like basically the market price is the best price, you know, because it's like miners who are more efficient than you have to sell some chunk of their Bitcoin to pay their operating costs. And like the idea that like you can compete with that is like, I think foolish. And so like the market price is usually like represents like the best price. But it's so attractive, the idea of mining. You can't do it like as like a homebrew kind of person anymore. But at the time, what was really attractive is like you could, like I said, like I mined like a Bitcoin, right? But like mining it yourself, it's like it's like directly you're getting that value, no intermediary. It's like this little mushroom in your closet that no one like has to know about. Not, I don't know, like a podcast out talking about it, but like that's what was really attractive about it. Was like this like FU money that you could mine. And so it's a little bit of a shame that you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, it's, the mining space is now heavily industrialized. You have Jack Dorsey and a bunch of these people that are just spinning up massive facilities, or at least attempting to. And now you got volcano mining, potentially solar mining. I remember when I got into crypto in 2016, that's when cloud mining was a thing. And I tried to, that was my first mining experience, and then realized that was a massive scam to begin with.
Even if they aren't a scam, it's like a really complicated futures contract to enter into. Like, because the difficulty adjustment like exists, and you're not like, you can find out information about like the cost of energy, but like you can also get like blindsided by the production of better mining equipment that like you are unaware of. It's a really difficult thing to, even if it's like an honest shop doing that, like how do you math that out correctly? It's tough.
Yeah, it was very obfuscated. Couldn't really understand what was going on behind the scenes. And that was my kind of introduction to mining. I never really set up a mining rig at the time. That's when crypto was really started booming. I think Bitcoin had the first time I'd purchased Bitcoin and Ethereum, I think Bitcoin was like $600 or $700 or something like that. So very, very early, like January of 2017 or something like that. And then went off into Ethereum and really dabbled with those shit coins. And so now the people who enter crypto, it's kind of the complete opposite. And I heard somebody talking about this earlier on a space, is that now you see those individuals who are moving to Ordinals started with Ethereum, and now they're trying to find something more decentralized, where on the opposite end, those who began with Bitcoin either completely stayed there and never left because of the purity of decentralization, or just became, or the other side of the coin is the individuals who became quote unquote bored and then went to go find smart contracts and more functionality, and now kind of get to build in between that. You seemed like you tended to stay in the realm of Bitcoin, moving kind of a little bit forward of, your chronological timeline. You started a podcast in 2016 that was mostly based around Bitcoin. Was this your first venture into, we'll say, building for Bitcoin, right? Because it's kind of the media component to it. What was the kind of pretense behind it?
Yeah, so I think how I got there was, so I mentioned I was like buying selling domain names, and like in addition to that, like making websites. Like for a long time after college, I didn't work for anyone. I had a little LLC, and I developed websites that like made passive income like through advertising basically. And then I would sell those websites at like a multiple of the revenue. So if it was making like $1,000 a month, like I would sell it for like 36 months of like revenue. And I was like doing that for a while. And then like in 2014, I sold all of my websites to buy Bitcoin because I wanted to FOMO in super hard. And I did that. I basically like YOLO traded. I was like, I'm either gonna, and I also at the time I had just like proposed to my wife. So I was like, I'm either gonna pay for the wedding or I'm gonna be a very bad husband. This is like a very like binary outcome. So I like FOMO'd in all my websites. And then when you have like if you have like one big egg in Bitcoin and it's like most of your money, like it keeps you up at night. It's a very nerve-wracking position to be in. And so I think, that's an important background of like, it's like why I made a podcast was like, I was listening to this thing called Bitcoin Uncensored, Krista Rose and Joshua Unseth. They're making an incredible Bitcoin podcast. And I came across that through Counterparty, which is like a way to like register. It's like a decentralized exchange with unique names. And so I was like speculating on that, similar to domain names. So like I have like 1,000 Counterparty asset names, speculating on like maybe that will be used. And they were making this podcast, which was hilarious. And I love like internet culture like that. Like if, for example, like when I was making websites and trading domain names, I was big on forums, and on forums, people like share content. It gets like stickied, and it's like you become like a community member. So like podcasts like were sort of like becoming a very similar thing in Bitcoin at the time. And I was following it so closely because I wasn't sleeping well with how much I had like gambled on Bitcoin. And so it's sort of like a way to like self-soothe is to have a podcast where you like, get the opinions of other people and hopefully like, talk your bag, which in my case was Bitcoin. Like that's the only way there's probably other ways to explain it, but like, I think that's probably the biggest thing. Like now today, and I'm not like a long-term holder. It's not like I have like a big stash somewhere. It's more like I've bought and sold and bought and sold. And like, sometimes I feel like it's a good time and I'm wrong. Sometimes it seems like a bad time and I'm wrong. Sometimes I'm right. It's like, and there's like always an opportunity. You've never missed an opportunity in Bitcoin. It's like sometimes I remember feeling like I was late, and then now people are like, "Oh, you're an OG," but I remember when I was new, and I think it's like there's always opportunities. And one of the things that I'm kind of glad that happened to me early is I traded some shit coins on BTCE, like things like Purecoin and like Feathercoin and things like this. And like really lost a lot of money doing that. And that taught me like really early on that like these alternate things, like they're like penny stocks, but like worse. Not that people haven't made money on them. People make money on these things, but it did make me wary of them, and more Bitcoin focused. Lately, I mess with Ethereum because that's where a lot of NFT action's at. But whenever I make Ethereum, I just convert it to Bitcoin.
Interesting. We'll touch on Ethereum in a little bit, but in the form of a pre-NFT, you have Counterparty that started in 2014, so you were there pretty much since the inception.
A year late.
It started 2014, right? Pretty
Yeah,
sure.
I was registering stuff in 2015.
Okay. So that was actually when some of the first collections started coming up. There was Spells of Genesis that year.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next year you had Rare Papes. And then I think in between there was like Saratobi and some other things.
Sure.
Which of these collections had the biggest impact on you that helped you kind of conceptualize Bitcoin and build that product out for almost 4 years?
Rare Pepe, but Rare Pepe is also inspired by Spells Genesis, like a joke about Spells Genesis. So it's all related. But Spells of Genesis was impressive for their vision and the fact that they were like a company. Like, there's a lot of reasons people don't dislike them because they are a company, but it's like an innovative thing, I think, to like try to make a business out of this type of technology, in my opinion. So Spells of Genesis was making some interesting trading cards. And then like the company behind it, I think it's Ever Dreamsoft.
Dreamsoft, yep.
They have like other things that they made. They were trying to like get other companies to like offer digital collectibles. Like there's like some interesting like die cast cards, which are like related to like cars, like die-cast cars. There's something called a Force of Will, which is like a literal real card game. And they issued some cards. I think they like discontinued it. So they had like these experiments that they were running, these sort of like proof of concepts they were running. I would say most of them didn't hit any like big level of traction, but it was also like very early. And it's like the concept of an NFT is like the concept of NFT is nothing like broke the collective conscious, but like it went more mainstream. But at the time, it was like these are assets. We were calling them assets, crypto assets. And then Pepe was like really fascinating because of the community created aspect of it. And when that came up, my friends asked me if I wanted to be involved as a Rare Pepe scientist, and I said, this is going to go too far, and I don't want to be involved because of that. And then there was this Rare AF festival in 2018, and at that event, it was like basically like Rare Pepe, Crypto Punks, and Crypto Kitties, and maybe some other things, but it was sort of like about, those were like the main topics, I think, at the event. There was other things for sure. But at that event, it was like, okay, if this is like what too far looks like I'm kind of like down with this. And so I came away from that event looking at how I can make my own project. And I don't know if it makes, I don't even know if this chronology makes sense, or I don't know people would care necessarily, but like, oh geez, what are you doing? Screen sharing?
Yeah, screen sharing. Yeah, you can see this is your profile, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I bring up the screen share during the podcast so that those that aren't familiar, you can kind of visualize it. It helps. First, it helps people kind of find you, and then it helps them kind of understand what's really going on here. So we can dive into Bitcoins because you're going to mention that, and it has a bunch of properties that are very similar to Rare Papes, to Spells of Genesis, to some of these other earlier collections. Tell us, now take us through you talked about the inspiration. Take us through what Bitcorn Crops really is.
So Bitcoin Crops is a on-chain game similar to, if you ever played like incremental or idle games, like Adventure Capitalist or Cookie Clicker, where like you sort of like, the point is just to get more points. This is sort of like, that's like the sort of like the foundational part of it is you own a token called Crops, and then every 3 months an amount of Bitcoin is distributed onto those crops, and at the end of 4 years, whoever had the most Bitcoin was like announced the winner. So that's like the basic part of it. Like it's basically this game of, well, now that the people are more familiar with this stuff, it's like, it's a little bit of yield farming, before like yield farming was cool. It's a little bit of play to earn kind of. So it's like I was just really interested in how can we use the features of Counterparty to do two things, like show off the functionality that's available, um, like, and also how do you show off how do you use the chain, like not so much like I like at the time Bitcoin fees were like $20-$30 for like a very brief period of like 2017 2018, and so I wanted to make something that like wasn't super reliant on on-chain transactions, and this is also part of that too. But as you go through it here, like the idea is like you have these farms and they are at some location, and like that, like on your screen there, like on the map, that's that the size of that's like proportional to like how many crops you own.
Mm.
Like there's actually like a function I wrote that like is based on like acres. Um, and then there's like cards you can have, and the idea with the cards, they're like farm upgrades. Um, and all of these are like community submitted. And there's like a big aspect of it as well is sort of like, do you know what a cargo cult is?
Which one?
Do you know what a cargo cult is?
No, can you expand on that, please?
So like, if you can Google it, look at Wikipedia about this, but if what a cargo cult is basically is that there were some uncontacted tribes that like the UN or somebody, maybe the Indian government, like they like arrived in planes and like dropped supplies on like this like uncontacted tribe, and like they went on to build like fake runways, and like they had like little like they looked like air towers and stuff, and they were like trying to make the planes come back because they didn't understand like how the plane stuff worked, but they knew like what it looked like. And so in a way, I think of Bitcoin like a cargo cult because there's like of Bitcoin itself. So like there's like 21 million Bitcoin every year, every 4 harvests, the amount of like Bitcoin reward is cut in half. So there's like a halvening. There's like a only 21 million. There's like it's like there's like a hodl means like the people person with the most Bitcoin wins. There's like these cards get created to sort of like tempt people out of their Bitcoin. So it's not like a perfect analogy, but if you look into it a little bit, you'll see what I mean. Like a lot of it just is just like built into like the Bitcoin memes are just built into it. Like Bitcoin itself was a Bitcoin meme. Like everyone like will joke and say Bitcoin and stuff. So I just like snagged that and ran with it. But what you're looking at here is like people's different like farm arts. So like once you have a farm, you could like upload like what does your farm look like, and we sort of like enforce like a rule where like your like farm art has to like depict like a place basically. It can't just be like something that doesn't depict like what your farm looks like. It has to be like what your farm looks like. Some of these that you're looking at here are sort of like the default farm rollouts.
Yep, this is the oldest tab too. So I went sorted by oldest. First farm is
so like Genesis Farm is my farm.
Okay. Let's take a dive into it. So as you set this up, you choose the image. Do you also choose the location, or does it pin to where kind of you
choose the location? Yeah. You choose a location. So like, because at the time too, like, you know, I think people were like big into like trading virtual land as NFTs. And so again, so like we just like included that as well. It's like, all right, well now you own this land. So here's all the cards I have. And if you go up to the top, there's like an edit button in the top right. Is that right?
Yep.
Like on the image.
Yep.
And so you can manage your farm, and you basically just need to like sign a message that proves that you own that address. So this is like the type of stuff that you see more commonly today in like MetaMask and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, you know how you sign stuff to like access it with MetaMask. This is like all that stuff like with Counterparty and Bitcoin technology. And it's very like basically this was Kickstarted as well. Like I did a initial crop offering is what we called it, but I put like 90% of the crops, maybe more, maybe put like 95%. I forget exactly how much on the Counterparty decks. And I raised like $60,000 basically to create this and host this. This is something that Might Be Mike is his handle made, where he basically using the APIs I made public, he made it so that you can like basically battle the farms, and so like different cards give you different like buffs and debuffs, and you actually also have to have a token to access this game as well. But you can kind of see like how it works.
Oh wow! So this battle you didn't create. This was a user who.
No, I didn't make this. Yeah.
Wow.
So like initially, the way I conceived of it was very simple. Like if you went to bitcorns.com/bitcorns.pdf, I think, which kind of gets back to the cargo cult thing of like, if you go to bitcoin.org/bitcoin.pdf, there's like a PDF there. So it's like just full of memes like that. Let me see. Yeah. bitcorns.com/bitcorns.pdf. This is like the initial corn offering piece of it. But it contains within it like the basic overview and outline of like what would be done. And within the conception, there's basically no the cards and the art that you've like shown on screen. That didn't come until like a chat room opened up, and people just showed up and like demanded the ability to do that basically. Because like originally I was like, we're gonna issue crops. Those crops are gonna earn Bitcoin at a certain rate, yield farming, and the winner will have like the most at the end. And that's how we're gonna play it. And you can like through the market, like maybe accumulate or whatever. And then the creation of like the cards became a part of like how we can get more Bitcoin if you like don't have some like basically the chat, we would run auctions, and like the only way you could bid in this auction to get these cards was with Bitcoin. And it just like developed from there. Like some of the things that are pretty cool as well, if you go to like and then I started coding in some functionality. Like some of the people playing would like pitch me on like, what if this card had like a real function in the game? And so there's several like that. If you went to the Bitcoin cards and search for dry as a bone, or just dry, you might have to like just like like search like the page, not the search bar.
So here, as I search for these, and I'm looking through the cards now, it was interesting. First, as I was looking through the PDF, which I'll go back, the crowd sale was April 1st, 2018. The first farm that you created was in January of 2018. So it took you a few months to really put this all together.
The first Bitcoin harvest was April 1st. But like this went live, I think the sale maybe went live in February.
Yeah, and now as I'm looking through these cards, and these cards are quite beautiful.
That one, there you go. Hold on, stop. See that dry as a bone? So this is like one of the earlier functional cards, and the way it works is basically like everyone received dry as a bone. It was like distributed as a dividend onto everyone that had crops, so everyone received some of this. And every time a harvest would happen, my code would do a calculation, and the farm that had the highest balance of this card would like not receive their reward, that they would be like dry as a bone. And if you go back to the cards, there's like another one called Forever Moist, which like protects you from the dry as a bone like attack. You see the one that's like blue rimmed?
Yeah, this one right here.
So if you have a Forever Moist card at your farm, you're like protected from like the dry as a bone debuff. And like that's like one of the fun like functional aspects that we came up with. Again, like the community like just came up with that, and I was like, yeah, that's fun. So if you have this one, your farm is like protected. But like the interesting like part about the dry as a bone thing is like if you have a high balance of this card, you're like attacked, but it also sort of like arms you for like the next time, and like you can like attack somebody else with it. I think what happened in practice is like it happened a few times, and then somebody just like sat on the highest balance and like just was like whatever. They sort of like took it out of play. But this is a pretty rare card. I think there's only like a handful of these. Maybe there's like, yeah, see, there's only like three of these.
Three. Wow.
And so like people can issue like pretty much whatever they want the supply to be. Similar to Rare Pepe. And it's kind of funny, like you mentioned like people, one of the things I like to say about the Bitcoin stuff, it's like the first unhistoric NFT project. It's just like down the memory hole. And that's like currently happening with my little Dan files thing. It's kind of funny because like all these sites are popping up and like the collection is just like not included, even though like I published like a bunch of JSON files like depicting the collection in the first 1,000. It's very odd, but
yeah, we are gonna dive into that. We are definitely gonna dive into that.
But there was like a podcast that came out of this. Like the community contributors made this. So like I sort of like game mastered this thing, but all of the effort is like on like the community members. So like, for example, there exists like physical cards that somebody printed out, and like there's like a foil wrapper. Somebody actually, his name's Roger. He went and made those, and like when we were at a conference in Atlanta, like showed up with like a box of cards that like we could like offer people. Or that same guy Roger, he's currently working on a book, like a 420-page book about Bitcoin.
Wow.
Most of it's like the cards themselves, but it's also like documenting all this like weirdness. I'm trying to think of another one that's like got a functionality. There's one called Fullcorn, where like if you have it on your farm, it like and you click it, it changes like the layout of the website. There's one called Cornfetti, where like if you collect enough of them, you have like it will like spray confetti onto your farm. There's another one that I'm forgetting.
I mean, if you look at the top, so there's 364 of these total over the span of 4 years. You do see some similar ones from Pepe's, like the McAfee ones, similar McAfee one with the image. There is a lot of crypto history or historical references, right? You have Dash with, is that Roger Ver that's on there? You have the Kornamoto, which is, right, there's so many Nakamoto derivatives now. If you, off the top of your head, how many card or Bitcoin contributors do you think you had? How many individuals contributed to the card directory specifically? And how many people do you think were playing this at one time?
Number of unique card contributors. I think it's got to be over 100. I should know that. This is like one of the criticisms of Dan, the avatar Dan, is I didn't like track that well enough, which is like shame on me. But like, yeah, I wish I knew better what that answer was. But like some of these here, like look at click on Fullcorn. Yeah, you're right. Scroll up.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, click on that guy.
Yes,
and the site kind of loads slow.
Yeah, it's okay.
Not VC backed.
Fullcorn backed. I also did pull up the X chain for Bitcoin, which was the essentially be the in-game currency. 20,999,999 total. And it's funny, the description says Bitcoin is kind of cryptographically modified organism, CMO, that is harvested 4 times per year by farms, sowing Bitcoin crops resistant to bugs and censorship of all types, or only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, which it pretty much did. So you had so going into this, it was always known that the game was going to last only 4 years.
So if you look at the PDF, it basically says like at the end of the 4 years, it's a commitment to the 4 years, but after those 4 years, like it'll enter like a free play period basically. But it's super contingent on like a bunch of stuff. Like one of the things that I've found that's hard to maintain when it comes to like beyond the 4 years is cost of maintenance, but as well as like just the complexity of keeping up with the counterparty network. Like it's not like an ossified protocol. Like they keep making changes, and those changes, like each change, like requires like a series of complicated like re-indexing and coding against the new stuff. So it's actually difficult to like offer this to be a functional thing for the far future. However, what I've been working on is basically a few things. So, as the sort of custodian of this website, and like the centralizing factor of it, my sort of like duty, I think, is to make sure that there persists far into the future a website where it's like, here are the cards, like here's these are all the official assets that are like part of this project. Here's like some history. Here's an archive of the website, the one that we've just been looking at. But it's hard to keep the functionality part up. Now, if you go to like click on, I know I'm kind of leading in a weird way, stay on full corn, and then click into like one of these farms that owns it on there. Click on one of their names.
All right, let's see. There's some funny names on here. So No Love for City Crops, Anarcorn, like Anarchy Syndicate, and Naras. And there's even some funny coops too. You got Hold Gang, Corntang Clan, Magic Internet Corn Alliance.
So people wanted to like play cooperatively to like overcome the fact that like this one farm maybe like won the thing right out of the gate. This is a great farm. This might be Mike's farm. This is like Bitcorn farm or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, it's Bitcorn. Yep.
If you can find full corn on his list of cards, it might take a second to find it, but it'll be worth it. He's basically one of the largest holders. He's been really diligent, but you can see even he hasn't been able to collect them all. And he's been collecting like for a long time. But if you could find full corn on here and click it, it shows you sort of like the functionality, the utility of the full corn.
We'll find it. While I
he's got a great collection though here, like Cornfetti. That's an example of one. He doesn't have enough for the feature to appear, but if he had 800, he would have a full cob, and then the effect would work. But he doesn't have enough there.
So while I search for this,
smash it.
There it is. Oh wow.
So these are like the funny like community things that we worked out. I don't know if it was worth it, but like
that's worth it. That's worth it. And for those that are just listening, you click on full corn, and the background of the bitcorns.com website populates with popcorn and all kinds of various forms of corn on the cob. So just it's like it's like a little.
But for whatever reason, and the other thing that was beneficial to the Bitcoin as a project was that Rare Pepe scientists stopped submitting new cards in 2018, and so there was sort of like a life raft a little bit for the people that are like still wanted to produce this type of crypto art or crypto collectibles. I'm actually like don't care like how you think of it. It's like a digital thing that you can own. I don't like the terminology is not important to me anymore.
Yeah, so there's 364 of these total. There was a natural trade-off or transition, I guess is the right word, from Rare Pepes to Bitcorn Crops. And now as Bitcorn Crops has ceased operations, I guess, maybe intermediately. And now the vision of the project, or at least how others view it, is this like kind of historical NFT project that's kind of forgotten about, but it, has a plethora of cards from a variety of, Rare Pepe artists or artists who have gone on to do their own thing. Now it's viewed as a collectible. Going back into 2018 and looking at that that PDF, everything that's in that PDF is all about gaming. It's all about the game and trying to embrace it. Did you ever figure out that this would just become like a natural collection after all of the Bitcoin tokens had been mined?
Yeah, I think so. I would say like everyone involved with this is like a very self-aware early adopter and visionary for the future that like everyone seems to think is like uh, unforeseen. But actually, the rooms I've been in for a long time is just like waiting for other people to catch up to the idea that like we can create these scarce digital goods and we can consciously design them in such a way to be collectible. For example, on your screen right here, the Pornos. This is like the different Ninja Turtle cards, right?
Oh, yep.
So that this person created 4 of these, right? Well, that's like a sub collection within the collection, and like collect, like you want to collect the full set. Like there's a lot of things in here that are just specifically designed to like create incentives around collecting the pieces, or like within their issuance. Like if you want your thing to be really rare, it's like you issue 1. If you want it to be like everyone has it, like you issue a ton. Like these are choices that people have made. And there's a couple things about that make it like unhistoric and hard to find. Is like, this isn't a project that nobody cared about, and like there's like 99,000 million like unsold things that somebody owns, and like you can grab a position and then discover it and make like a windfall. Okay, this is something that like people who really cared about the future of digital assets, like we're just like memologists, like memeing on Bitcoin on purpose, and like we were the collectors real time. Like if you look at the earliest ones that have like 30, like nobody has more than 2. Like maybe one person has 2, but like these have been collected, and so it's like hard to discover because there's no payoff for somebody to like discover it. If that makes sense. But like these have been collected. It's not like it's like a niche thing, but like that's what I like about the whole we'll call it the NFT space. Is like, in my view, you don't need this like sleek mainstream thing to be successful, because because of the economics of this stuff. Like a small core of like just interested collectors like is enough. We don't need this to scale to like 1 million people. This can scale to like, so like maybe there's been like 450 farms, maybe 500 farms. I would say the core active group of hardcore Bitcoiners is like maybe like 30, and that like waxes and wanes. But I think a lot of people that did engage with the Bitcoin crop game have found their way basically to. It was like a really. It put a lot of the people that mess with Bitcoin, like kind of put them off the sidelines into like messing around with crypto. You know, like if imagine pre-OpenSea, and like, you know, like I don't know when, maybe at the time OpenSea was like starting to show up, like super rare starting to show up, but like before what we know now is NFTs. It's like your options were like day trading crypto, becoming a Bitcoin core contributor, which is like no way, like that's not accessible to people. Or like listening to podcasts. Those are like your options. And those might still be your options, but like the Bitcoin Crops thing gave a lot of people that I knew or met through it the opportunity to like make an asset, have a wallet, think about like, how do I want to design the incentives around my digital collectible? Can I gamify this in some interesting way? I think that's one of the interesting things about crypto that has crypto's made available to people. It's often like talked pejoratively about as like Ponzonomics, but like I think usually pre-crypto, the incentive structure is like the incentive structure on high, and like you can like opt in or you can opt out. But with these tools, you can create like new incentive structures. You can gamify things. You have access to like tools and trade-offs that you like dials that like weren't usually available to people. Like you can basically create marketplaces. Like that's like a weird tool to have. And I think even if people are exploring it with these memes, mimetically, jokingly, ironically, like, haha, like it's still like an interesting, fulfilling thing for people to like, because they're just like not they're not levers that you're allowed to have, you know, like those are other, like that's like, think of a, like Powell, like this Federal Reserve. I would just listen to this like Federal Reserve Powell guy talk about how he's like pulling these levers. Like those are not levers for you and me, Jake. Those are not available to us. But it's like the crypto has like been like a little chink in this like who has control of the incentives. That's how I think about it, at least. It's not, I don't think it's discussed like that a lot, but that's what I view as like happening here is the ability to like redefine the market rules without like being like an institution is like really empowering for certain people.
We're just going to store all of our money in rare pepes and Bitcoins, and that's kind of going to be the new medium. I am interested, though. I was browsing through the Emblem Vault page, and, you know, you have the single assets. I will be interested once we launch curated collections and we get a curated collection going for Bitcoin. How many of the original holders are willing to vault them and sell them to kind of help with the distribution and awareness of it? You know, that'll come at some point this year. So it'll be interesting because I've always been very, I guess it's like unfamiliar with Bitcoin Crops because the information's there, but there's a lot of complexities behind it. And also it's like deep down the counterparty rabbit hole. And in this space, it's so easy to,
I like being deep down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, dude, that's how you started Dan Files, man. Like I'm sitting here on Dan Files, 65 of the first 1,000 digital artifacts inscribed on Bitcoin blockchain using Ordinals. It's your irreverent experiments. And so as I click on the website, and I actually had no idea about this until I went to your profile and looked at it, and I was like, you know, these sub 1,000 inscriptions are selling for, you know, a Bitcoin a piece or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Have you, well, first, before we talk in speculation and things like that, tell us what Dan Files even is.
All right. So basically what the Dan Files is, it's the result of me following Ordinals and then seeing that inscriptions were available on mainnet and then rushing to get myself up on there. So like everything you see here is like pretty much produced within like a 12-hour window as I just like desperately try to inscribe. That's one way to think about it. But the reason I built it looks the way it looks is it's sort of like a subconscious dump, maybe. I was working on a protocol I call Artifact. It's like a Counterparty. If Counterparty was coded with Rust and had the features that I thought it should, I have like a private repo I've been coding. And I actually came across Casey's code, which is Ordinals, which is coded with Rust because it's like a Bitcoin NFT project. And so I saw Ordinals in like September or October. And I was like, oh, well, like this is a better Bitcoin NFTs. So like, great. Like I don't need to be working on what I'm working on anymore. And so when I saw that go live, I just wanted to have my own collection. Like I'm usually, so these particular ones you're showing are broken at the moment. I think to save their bandwidth, they've like blocked certain iframes, unfortunately. But like to like make sure the website stays up, I think they're saving their bandwidth. So I have to fix this.
They have been going through a handful of issues through the Ordinals Explorer. Now a few of them have popped up because they realized the centralization of the infrastructure is not just completely. It's not completely firm. It's only been 6 weeks, and there's probably a lot more demand than they had anticipated.
but I saw this coming, and I was rushing, and basically what I did is I just inscribed a number of things. So it's like it all was under the umbrella of like the Dan files, and then there's like different subsets, and I wanted to play around with like different, like, some of these are more in the realm, like these ones here are sort of PFP adjacent, but like there are also things that, like, if you look at them, like this is like your unrequited love, your self-sabotage. They're like, the things that people don't want to share, basically. So it's sort of like a subverted PFP project. Here's a piece where I took a photo of my hand, because I'm really self-aware that this is like a long-term transmission potentially, right? So this is like proof of existence, which is like a reference to like a very common like topic in Bitcoin and in crypto. But like, here's my left hand, and like eventually I'll be like the shadow, because like I'll be dead. And then I recorded my voice, which probably won't play because of that embedding issue we just had. But I recorded a audio clip of my voice that's just sort of like, I'm Dan Anderson. I existed. I was born in 1990. And I just wanted to like use the new medium of ordinals and inscriptions to make like a long-term future broadcast. So I think that, and because I was working on a project literally called Artifact, and some people have been talking about these things as digital artifacts, I wanted to like take that seriously there. I would love to see more people try that. Like, if this is like a long-term solution to the future, like try to communicate to the future, like what is worth the nomenclature of artifact. Like artifact is like, if you think about real artifacts, it's like these lost things of like culture that we discover, and like we like add some piece of our human story. So in some ways, it's like a big phrase to be throwing around at like random JPEGs. But I would be interested to see more people try to like play around with that, or like here. Like a lot of this is like tongue in cheek too. Like you're looking at the number wangs, and these are prime numbers. And like, I'm just very aware of like how people trade like ENS numbers and stuff like that. So it's like, all right, like here's some number wangs.
20 ting.
Or like just like some a lot of it's just like a brain dump. I don't know how to talk about it. And it's just something that I did.
And the shitpost ones are pretty good, because the images that are inscribed, the early ones and a lot of the high selling ones are actually like kind of either Pepe's or kind of just memes. It seems to be that's the easiest. It's the easiest way for ordinal collectors to collect things, is just looking for images that are right. And so on this one, it says it's not possible to NFT on Bitcoin. No, it's necessary. And it looks like you got the imageflip.com down there in the bottom a little bit. OP false. That's funny because that's the op return.
Yeah. I like the low effort aesthetic.
Like, this one's my favorite one. Yeah.
If you look at a lot of like rare Pepe cards, like the corners have like, they're not like transparent. They're like white. I like the rare effort, the low effort aesthetic. I think it's like a niche thing maybe, but like I'm not trying to overthink some of the stuff. Like, or if you look at the top here, the very, very top, scrolling further than you've scrolled is like maybe not recommended. It gets down to like, I inscribed a goatse. It was like the first ordinal censored, and like a news article got written about it on Cointelegraph. But like it's blacked out, so you won't like be shocked. But if you hovered over it, it would be a shocking, like not good for YouTube thing. But at the top here, like, like these are from an OpenAI DALL-E. But I like left the watermark on it.
Yeah, you can see down here in the bottom right corner the 5 colors.
Yeah, because like that is also like kind of like the other thing that's just playing around with is like digital artifact is like not a phrase coined by Casey. He's like repurposing it, but like Wikipedia again, look up digital artifact. It's a digital artifact is like a glitch within a digital medium. And so like, that watermark is a digital artifact, or like the weirdness of like how this looks is like, if you scroll down to like another one here, look at the things like not coming off his chin right. Like that's a digital artifact. But like, you know, I just think this is what we're doing. Like these are called QWERTY. And so like, we're sort of like flippantly making like ourselves immortal, basically, is what I think we're doing here. And then these are called eternity. And I think even though the things that we're doing are like silly, I do think that they're gonna like matter, basically, or like they're gonna be these long-term transmissions. And that's definitely speculation. Like, but I do think the Bitcoin network is incentivized to exist for a long time. But it does become like really speculative when you think of, you know, the internet's been around, let's just call it the 60s. And that's like very generous, because that's when like maybe like ARPANET or things like that were around. Like it would be like it would be like a military internet. But that's a very generous accounting of it. And that's like 60 years. So I think it's safe to say that the internet, as we know it, will be here 60 years from now. But beyond that, I think it becomes very speculative. One of the things that was really surprising to me with Ordinals was how instantly it was declared historical. And I feel like that's like, there's like a lot of, it's really an interesting postulation, because like I thought when I was inscribing the Dan files, I was like, oh, this will be like everything else, where, you know, it's like a tree fell in the woods, and then like 5 years from now, people like try to figure out what the oldest stuff was, and it'll be like a rerun of the historical NFT space. But instead, people like ran that loop super quick. I think it's a bit of a timing thing. But I think what's interesting is like declaring something as historical. It's sort of like it kind of like points to like you have a future view that like this is like this will become like the standard into the future, which is sort of like a view that says like the future will be static, like we're not going to get better than this. When in reality, I think if you look at like how many things get declared historic, it just points to like more new things in the future in my mind, not like less new things in the future. If anything, like the rate of like, this is like a Terrence McKenna, I'm biting Terrence McKenna with this, but the rate of novelty is increasing over time, to where like we have to discuss like how weird it's becoming. But like more things will be created, like new things will be created in the future. So it's hard to declare something as historic in a way. That was a real rambly rant, but
no, it's good. Yeah. So I actually have now moved over to the Rare Ordinals directory. Right. It's just it's another thing that spun off, very similar to Rare Pepes and to Bitcoins, and now you kind of even have the same things happening on Ethereum with fake memes and notable Pepes and all these different things. Yeah. I did want to tag on a little bit to what you were mentioning about declaring history kind of in the moment, because this is as somebody who is like kind of, I guess you say, early to the NFT archaeology movement, but never really discovered anything, kind of just like commentated on it, is like from like a journalistic perspective. One thing I've noticed talking now with maybe 50 to 100 different creators on this show, from 2011 to 2019, is that most people who were doing this or who were creating was more experimental at the time, but also not many people were looking around at the time that it had happened. For example, with like Rare Pepes, right? Or even some of the early stuff on Namecoin, whether you think it's an NFT or not, they're still early experiments. And most of these people were doing it out of experimentation, out of fun, but also they were taking some of their expertise from the main world or even interest and putting it on a blockchain. So for example, with like early Namecoin stuff, you see a lot of like poems, a lot of these like puny codes, which are just, it's like XN -- symbols, and they turn into like emojis and things like that. And then even with Spells of Genesis, right? Shaban has prior experience with, I think it's called manga or one of his card games beforehand. So they're kind of just taking what they already knew or were interested in and then putting it onto the blockchain. It's kind of similar with your Dan files, honestly, right? You're taking a lot of the experience that you had through all of your prior, experience, I guess we'd say, on the blockchain, and then just kind of putting it in there. But unless you were declaring it historical, you were also kind of experimenting. Who deemed it historical was the speculators, because they've kind of seen this wave happening before. So it's almost this like oxymoron of declaring things as historical from the people who collect history, because maybe they want it to be historical. Maybe it could be historical. Who really knows? But does that act? But the big question, I think, and I'll propose this to you, is if you were experimenting on your own while you thought nobody was looking, turns out people were watching, and then those people who do collect history declare it historical, does it therefore eliminate the idea of it being historical from a philosophical perspective?
I don't know about the philosophical perspective, but I would basically agree. I think mostly people are just speculating on like this thing might become historical, but like the shorthand is just to say this is historical. I think like history is written by like in the future. So like we'll figure it out. But I think mainly people are speculating that this might be historical. These things may have some importance or be part of a story. And I think people like White Rabbit have really interesting things to say about like the historical narrative and how different things like based on their impact. But again, it's all speculative, and that's fine. The other thing I think about with NFTs and like digital artifacts is like, for me, like the thought experiment here is think about like, and I'm getting there because you're talking about like experimentation, but like think about like Steve Jobs and like Wozniak, and like they had like this homebrew club where like they had their little like computers at the center of like a room, and they were like showing each other their PCs. I think in a way, some of these NFTs that are getting created, it's like, what if you could like own the log file on those like computers? Like that's a little bit like what we're sort of like creating. Like that's to me what this looks like from a historical standpoint. Is like these are the product of the experimentation. This is the output of that. And like if you could own, for example, like the log files from like Steve Jobs like PC like a long time ago, that people would collect that. And so even though it's not like a one-to-one analogous, that's how I view this from like the collecting of the experimentation. These NFTs are like the detritus of the experimentation.
Yeah, I mean, it's you do, if we are making parallels to collecting history in the moment, it's similar to one of the most recent items that had a big sale was the first ever iPhone that was never opened, sold for like $50,000 recently at an auction. And so unless this person's the lucky person in the world and had an iPhone and then forgot about it for 15 years, or they said, hey, this is going to change the world, let me take some of these and kind of put it in a closet or in my safe and then come back to it years later. That's kind of like a similar, I guess, analogy to it. Although they didn't have people in the moment trying to say, hey, let me spend $50,000 on your iPhone 1 while the iPhone 1s are still being built, because they could go buy it for a smaller fraction of the price, right? It'd be similar to kind of like inscribing these ordinals. You could go inscribe it, but because of that number, maybe it's just because of the more accelerated rate, and we're just talking now specifically about ordinals, the accelerated rate of adoption so much faster there that the numerology, or the way that it's chronologically ordered, has a huge impact for at least some collectors. Yeah, it's quite interesting. At least if I had to kind of shine my own thoughts on it, is could it be historical? I think it's probably likely. I'm not out there yelling from the rafters saying that they are historical, because who knows, something in ordinals could break and it kind of just all goes to zero. I don't know. I haven't really talked with many people though through interviewing a lot of the OGs, quote unquote OGs, that you'd said that thought they were creating history in the moment.
Mm-hmm. You know, the argument in favor of it being historical, I guess, would be something like it's very unlikely that the Bitcoin core developers will make a mistake again like this, where they make it available. Like, you're not going to get more data storage than this, like as easy as this. Like, that's not like in the future, I would say, for Bitcoin. So, in some ways, the space that this is occupying on the blockchain is not going to change, might even become less over time. But let's just say it's steady because it's hard to make changes within Bitcoin. So that's a decent argument for like, this is like going to kind of like stay as good as it gets. However, what I think people will do from here, and even stuff that I think about doing, is like the method that ordinal inscriptions use is very generalizable. So like if you look at how it, even if you're not technical, it's like literally the way it works is like there's a little thing that says ord to signify that it's an ordinal inscription, and then there's the data. But like it'd be very easy to fork that code, and rather than it say ord, have it say, you know, XYZ, and like use the same methods for different protocols. And that's what I would have liked to see for something like these like .sat names, where they're like uploading all these JSON files to like have sat names. They should have just forked the code and just like use the same technology for a different purpose. Because like it's effectively spam. I know it's ironic to like talk about spam when like ordinals are like spam from like a maximalist perspective, but like it's effectively spamming like this like art project, or this like we're trying to like communicate content, not be a rails for like other functionality, if that makes sense. So I think it would have been much more friendly to have forked it and done that. But you know, degens are going to degen. I'm very bearish though on like alternate domain name systems. I think like .com is like the big daddy. It's like what makes the internet work. It's like it's in like domain names are in all your emails, all your hyperlinks. It's like the web. It's like trying to replace the highways and roads. It's like it's not going to happen. In my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that. You've seen there's been so many different experiments with the domain specifically, right? You had .bit that started first with Namecoin, then it moved down to, you had Counterparty, which is kind of just, there's no dot at the end, but it's just kind of its own thing. You had EtherID, I believe is what began, or Lineage, name register on Ethereum in 2015. And now you have kind of .eth. I guess for different protocols or different blockchains, there's a different use case, because the most people on Ethereum who use .eth are kind of speculating that that's going to essentially become like your Web3 handle, on top of your domain name. I don't know what you would do with .sats outside of kind of just flex it, but in crypto, that's kind of all you need.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that view either. It's a funny thing that a lot of people keep trying to recreate, and it's like it's not broken. It's like there's like hundreds of millions of domain names in the domain name system. It is like a fundamental piece of the web as you know it, and like to try to unseat it, it's like the problem's not there, in my opinion. But I do feel like that's like self-evident. But like to your point about like speculation as well. One of my views about this whole thing as well is like it's almost like postmodern capitalism is like, you know, like you know, we're just gonna like trade the meme is like this weird thing that's happening right now, which might be only available. It might be like specific to our time. Like we might look back on this as like the tulip bubble and things like that. It's very possible. And like there might be artifacts of that become collectible, but like there is like a weird postmodern thing happening with these markets. You know, like think of how some people like trade stocks. Like some people literally just buy like Nike stock because they like the shoes, right? They're not looking at the financials of the business. They're like, I like big brand. I like shoes. I like Apple because I have an Apple computer. Like people are actually doing trades like that from a retail perspective, like all the time. They're just buying the stuff they like. And then you get like NFTs. In a way, they're like these multimedia ticker symbols. So like rather than like ABC stock, it's like I have blue monkey, and like it's this weird thing that's happening now, and I don't even think it's wrong necessarily, but like some of this stuff does boil down to like the and I mentioned it before, like it's access to like the creation and participation in markets in different ways that like you're usually not allowed to, um, is sort of like people like the ability to like corner markets.
Yep.
Like, oh, there's only 300 of these. Like, great. Like this, like there's if we can get enough attention on this like small supply, like the just the simple supply demand function will like result in a gain for me. And that's like goes back to the Ponzonomics. I don't know. I don't know if it's good or bad or whatever. I do think it's the way I think of it is it's sort of like in this, the whole world's going through this right now with like the Fed stuff, or like the China and Russia declaring like they're going to like make the petro yuan and stuff like that. Is like some of the institutions and the financial like underlying parts of our economy, they're just shitcoining too.
They're
like,
creating their own memes.
It's like that's what's so weird. It's like now that so many people have access to like things outside of that system and like have played with like those incentives, and like it's not from on high. It's like it's from like Carl in his basement. It sort of like takes a lot of the veneer off, and like we're all shitcoining now.
That is actually a good point. I did see that. That was this morning at the time of this recording. Putin and President, what is it, President Xi or Xi? That's just my uncultured way of saying announcing the Chinese president, I guess you'd say. It is a cool way of saying that they are shitcoining. I guess with NFTs, you kind of have this movement kind of pioneered by Punk 6529 of seize the memes, because he believes that memes are going to be kind of this new way to transfer value between one another. And it seems like it's doing pretty well. I know we do kind of live in this echo chamber and this weird part of the internet. But one thing that NFTs, the broad sense of NFTs, do capture that I don't think shitcoins or fiat currencies do is this like idea of social capital, where if you trade an NFT, you're also trading like this idea that this person held it beforehand. It was created with this person. There's proof of work behind it because this person had to put an idea on the blockchain and kind of capture it all together. And I think that's kind of dismissed. A huge like piece that's been overlooked within NFTs is this idea that yes, there's monetary capital that's transferred as well, but this idea of social capital. It's the same idea that on a podcast, I call myself a social investor because I get to share credibility with Dan Anderson, who has all this history and all this knowledge. And now I get to go on and say, hey, I got to have an hour and a half long conversation with Dan. And so that kind of raises my social awareness, my social credibility as well. Have you thought about that at all? About the social?
I'm glad I can offer you social capital. I'm going to offer you, I will 10x your social capital today. No, I have thought of that. I think it's a really good point. I think I agree with you a lot. And where I see this come up in my crypto journeys is when the technocrats and the artists collide. And like something like Ordinals pops up or something on NFTs. And like, if you're a technocrat, you sort of like can't see you only understand the code, and like you think the code is like what generates value, which I think is just like a broken like viewpoint in my opinion. And then you have like artists and collectors not coming in. So there's like some technical knowledge, but that's not their main where they think value comes from. and those two groups usually talk past each other. But I do think that it's pretty clear to me that it is within the consciousness of people that like value is ascribed. Does not guarantee, it's not within the protocol to produce value. It's within the group of people around that protocol to like ascribe the value. And it's good to have the technology underlying that can like hold the weight of that social consensus, but it is the social consensus that the value comes from. And just to get back to like, just to mention the chairman of the Federal Reserve again, the guy literally is going on TV to like mind fuck the economy. He's like, I want to anchor expectations, because that's what moves markets is people's like what's happening here collectively. And so I totally see that. And I think that's missed a lot when you have like a very technocratic viewpoint. But it's totally within the mind of men that value is created.
Yeah. Speaking of like bank runs, and this, we can kind of tail it off on this conversation with NFTs specifically, they're all essentially, maybe 99% are all self-custodial. Everybody who's creating it is inputting it to the blockchain. They're all held in their Web3 wallet or your free wallet or whatever it is. Those who are shitcoining, whether you're Vladimir Putin, right, creating the Petro Yuan, all of that has to be held somewhere. Oil has to be held somewhere. Fiat has to be held in a bank somewhere. Even some of the cryptocurrencies people talk about with Bitcoin and self-storage, but all of these blow-ups between BlockFi and FTX and all of these is people putting their currencies into somebody else's custody, and then therefore they're losing it and trusting it. So maybe this is the big difference, is that those who are creating the generalized term of NFTs are just very familiar with self-custody, and maybe it's just because there is no other option of why it becomes the truest form of capitalism and transfer.
Yeah, I could see that. I think self-custody is empowering, and it also makes you appreciate why banks exist. This is something that Joshua Umseth is like famous for saying, but like trying to like managing private keys is a specialization and complicated. So I get why people don't necessarily like excel at it. I think it is empowering for some people. But it's kind of shocking that we have a system where like you put your money in a bank and it stays there. They don't lose it. And even if there's a bank run, apparently they don't lose it still. Like that's like some weird magic that maybe it will like fall apart. But I don't want to live in a world where like we all have to self-custody our values. Like banks do exist for a reason. I don't know if I'm dovetailing into I might take an opposite position to you potentially on this, but I did enjoy this chat. I hope we covered some interesting things. Did we get through most of what you were interested in? Like, yeah. I really appreciate you reaching out to me. I do sort of lurk now. Basically, when all my friends started talking about Bitcoin and I didn't have to talk to them about it, like they came to me about it, that's sort of like when I didn't need to like participate in like the public sphere as much, because it was like this, I can sleep at night, like other people know about Bitcoin now.
Do you miss the public sphere at all?
I mean, I'm here.
Yeah, there we go.
I listen to a lot of content. I find the Twitter Spaces to be something like AM radio. Mm-hmm. I think we just reinvented AM radio, but it's interesting to hear the narratives that come up. It's really interesting to be a creator of something that like you can see where you're down a memory hole. It's just what I'll say is to not just start holding conversations. Like I've been a follower of projects, a creator of projects, a curator of projects, and like the Dan files is the first thing that I've sort of created as like mostly just as a creative expression versus like being like a game master or a manager of like other people's work. This is like my first like primary work, I would say. But I've run the gamut of things, you know, like I've traded, I've invested, I've podcast, like I've been to events, like I like to try out the different things, and it gives you new perspective. Everything you try gives you new perspective. And one of the things that I think people that you might call a maximalist are missing is like, because they like prevent themselves from doing different things, they miss out on a huge perspective you get from like involving yourself in these things. And like, there's like a lot of risk of like your reputation or like your worldview shattering. But like I find any way you can come at this thing, let's just call it crypto broadly, from many angles, you get a fuller picture and a deeper appreciation, more humility, and way more like understanding of like why people do what they do. You know, it's like it's hard to have a broad brush with this stuff.
It really is, man. If I had to put myself along your journey, I'm now in that position, right? I had my podcast 2 years. I've now going on 3 years. I started working at Emblem Vault, so I got to see, you know, the management kind of perspective. And then recently I just started my own project, which is kind of just it's like another edition of the podcast called Jake Allen's Podcast, tokenizing NFTs in terms of like a social contract and things like that. It's been quite a interest. It's been only 3 weeks since I've launched this, and man, it's been quite eye-opening from the perspective of who's actually paying attention, how do you adjust things, the crypto space, and it's evolving. And one thing I even completely forgot to mention in the very beginning is when you built Bitcorn Crops or launched it literally at the top of the market. So the whole thing was built.
Timing was bad.
The whole thing was built right through one of the deepest crypto winters ever. So that's not a learning experience, man, then I don't know.
Yeah, we struggled through the winter, but it is what it is. You know, I'm a huge fan of Emblem Vaults, by the way. I'll be forever grateful to Emblem Vaults. At one point, I was 10% of all Emblem Vaults. I think I might represent like 1% at the moment, but at one point, I definitely was like 10% of them. It was like an incredible month of August. I was like not sleeping. I was day trading memes.
Quite beautiful. Yeah, we have a lot of things in store, man. Shannon's awesome, right? He was the security guy at Mastercoin back in the day, so he goes back to the same experience as you do, being through the whole, you know, the whole shebang, through all of the different movements. For a little alpha, and then I'll end it here. We will be coming to Bitcoin at some point here in the near future, so look out for that. That'll be a homecoming party for Emblem, because it did begin on Counterparty, or the token did at some point. So, Dan, dude, thank you for this, man. Incredible conversation. Glad we got to talk a lot longer. We're going to have to run back to part 2 at some point, man. I love philosophical conversations about this stuff. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake.
No problem. Thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll catch you next time.